Hi, everyone.
Hi, Erin.
How are you? Pretty good. You always come up with the best posters for these meetings, Patty. It always looks great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. One thing to note is that the URL is now different for getting more information from ACEP's website, but I might even give that a week and then I'll send more information out once everything's.
Okay. I got on the website because I had to go look for something this weekend and I noticed it's all spiffy.
Yeah, got the overhaul.
Wow. Very exciting.
And Russell, we haven't met you yet, I know, but just a heads up, we'd love to get an introduction once Erin starts us off here. I know you were probably the most recent add to our email list and then the first one on the call. So yeah, thanks again for joining and we'll look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, welcome. We'll do those right at the beginning before we have some updates, any new members. Welcome, everyone. We're just letting folks join. So just hang tight while everybody gets on, or tell us some good jokes.
Whoa. She is absolutely.
Bill, I think you may need to mute yourself. Bill Beatty.
And so we see her.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to those who are joining. We're just letting folks get on and get comfortable. We'll give folks a few more minutes to get on. Hi, everybody. We're letting folks join. We're just going to take a few more minutes. In the meantime, you can put jokes in the chat, or you can tell us jokes, or you can just tell us how the weather is in your neck of the woods.
I'm going to hold myself back from telling jokes now.
JR, I bet you have some really bad dad jokes. That's just my suspicion. But
yes, you would be correct.
In fact, I bet you're a master of bad dad jokes.
Erin.
Is it that obvious?
Yeah, Erin.
Yes.
Erin is Bill. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are a little segmented there.
Bill, can you hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you no joke. We had a major assembly of Juneau commission or committee of the whole discussion on the cruise ship industry today. And we also had an interview with a gentleman, a journalist from Seattle, who's very interested in making cruise about 200 million gallons replaced perhaps by the green corridor with hydrogen. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Very exciting indeed.
So I'll tell you a joke my sister told me. It's a parenting joke. So what's the difference between broccoli and boogers? It's hard to get kids to eat broccoli.
You know what? My 11-year-old daughter will love that one. That's terrific. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Hey, Aaron, what's brown and sticky?
Oh no, crude oil.
Uh-oh.
A stick.
Oh, yeah, dad
Yeah.
jokes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's orange and sounds like a parrot?
Carrot.
There you go, a carrot. You know, like that's yeah. If you're pitching for 11-year-olds, I don't know. Maybe she's already too old for those.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I see our numbers. It looks like the totals have plateaued a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for joining our monthly hydrogen energy working group meeting. We've got some good stuff today on the agenda. And we were just entertaining everyone with some bad jokes as we waited for folks to join. So, maybe I'll challenge you all next time, come up with some hydrogen jokes. That
Ooh,
might
I like
be appropriate. So, 2 hydrogen molecules walk into a bar, that kind of thing. Anyhow, you guys can think about that during the slow moments here.
So did you hear about the hydrogen atom that walked into the bar and said, hey, I'm sorry, I was in here earlier drinking. I think I left my electron behind. And they said, are you sure you left it here? And he said, oh yeah, I'm positive.
Good one.
Dun, 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 dun. Very good, JR. All right, JR gets the points, first points for the hydrogen joke. So bring them to our next meeting. This is great. The working group that with a sense of humor or not. So we're going to kick off as we always do with introductions of anyone who is new to the group. So if you are new to the group and you have never been in attendance, you know what, Mitch, I think we need you to mute yourself. If you're not muted, everyone please mute yourself. Thank you. All right. If you are new to the group and have never been in attendance at a hydrogen working group meeting, please introduce yourself. You can either jump right in or you can raise your hand. I think I see some new folks here, so please don't be shy. This is a really fun and welcoming group, and we tell bad jokes. So who would like to introduce themselves? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Paul Foose. And so I've been an advocate of hydrogen for 30 years, ever since we did the drilling for the McCushion geothermal project, but the timing just wasn't right. We all knew it was going to come to be the energy carrier for the 21st century, but now things have come around. So I'm working on a couple projects in the Aleutians based on geothermal, tidal, and wind, with the idea of course, it's all stranded energy. There's not very many people live out there, but it's really to make these hydrogen-based products for export that will replace carbon-based fuels and carbon-based mineral processing. Over.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. And we encourage you to put your contact info in the chat there, Paul, so people can get in touch with you and follow up. And we'll make sure you're included in any future announcements. Other new folks who haven't been on a working group call before who would like to introduce themselves, please feel free to jump in or raise your hand.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Betts from Coastal Villages Region Fund. We operate in 20 communities west of Bethel, and we are just monitoring opportunities for more sustainable energy generation and storage in our communities.
Terrific, thank you. Can you go ahead and put your contact info in the chat there, Nathaniel, as well as your affiliation, and that way we can update records and people can reach out to you if they want to follow up. Other folks who are new to our working group, please introduce yourselves. Don't be shy. Go ahead.
I'm Jen Witham, joining you from Anchorage, Alaska.
Thank you, Jen. Can you give us your affiliation?
Oh, sorry about that. I'm with Brown and Brown of Washington, and I'm part of their renewable energy group. I'm in the insurance industry and very interested in what's going on in Alaska. Very excited.
Thank you. Please put your contact info in the chat. And Paul, if you've got an email address you can put in the chat, same for Nathaniel, please put that in there so we can follow up with you. Of course, you don't have to if you don't want to, but
Just did.
great, wonderful. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you, Paul. Who else is new to our group who might like to introduce themselves?
Hi, AJ Perkins with Instant On and TechFlow. We are a microgrid integrator. We are working with the Tabunga tribe, helping them to build a microgrid on their island and using that as a way to create a digital map for the 229 Alaskan tribes to help bring more sustainability to them. And then we are also working on a couple hydrogen pilots, converting ethanol to hydrogen in California and Hawaii as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, AJ. Do you have any more information on any of those pilots that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah,
Maybe...
so we actually have one pilot that we are standing up in Barstow, California. We're going to be putting it at a gas station that has E85 already on the gas station. So we'll be able to take that E85 and convert it into green hydrogen to be able to produce hydrogen on demand for hydrogen electric vehicles. And when we're not using it to fill up hydrogen vehicles, we will be able to run it into a hydrogen fuel cell to produce electricity to power battery electric vehicles as well. So we just got through the first approvals from the mayor and the city council for Barstow, and we're working with a Native American tribe that's putting it at their gas station.
Okay, and do you have plans to parlay that into demos up here in Alaska?
Absolutely, yep. So that's our project that we're working on with the Tabunga tribe. Part of that is also to, right now it's bringing solar and natural gas fuel cells, but the goal is to be able to bring electrolyzers and to see what type of resources we can bring from the electrolyzer side as well to support whatever we can.
That's super exciting. Would you mind putting your contact info into the chat for folks? I think a number of folks may want to follow up with you on that. So thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you.
And thanks for joining us. Other new folks who might want to introduce yourselves, if you haven't joined our hydrogen working group before, this is the time to do it.
Ray Scandura, Shade Energy.
What's the name of your company again, Ray?
Shade Energy.
Okay, wonderful. And where are you based?
I was raised pretty much in Ohio, but I'm in Anchorage. Right now I'm in Anchorage, but I live in Dillingham.
Okay, wonderful. Do you have any particular hydrogen projects that you're working on currently?
Yeah, we have one on proposal now. We're sitting on a very large gas deposit, and our plan is to take the natural gas straight into, after scrubbing it, of course, into pipeline dry gas, turning it into fuel cells, and fuel cells to drive an electrolytic reduction to produce green hydrogen.
Okay, and that'll be out in. Oh, go ahead.
Well, as far as the carbon capture, we're going to carbon capture and utilization, and because there's not that much that's going to come out of our system.
Okay, and is that going to be out in Dillingham?
Yes.
Okay, that's really exciting. Would you mind putting your contact info into the chat so that we can follow up with you?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll just ask for those who aren't talking, please go ahead and mute yourselves so we don't get interference. Wonderful. Thank you, Ray. I look forward to following up with you. Russell, are you new to our group? I should know if you're new or not, but I don't think I've met you. Oh, I think you're muted. Russell Johnston. You're still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
This is my first meeting. I'm currently with the Member Advisory Committee with Golden Valley. And I joined because we're vastly underachieved in this region. We're way behind what other countries are doing, like Iceland and Europe. We really need to make some progress in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Appreciate having you here. Thank you. Other folks who might like to introduce themselves, who haven't been at one of our hydrogen working group meetings before. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Okay, I'm going to take it that those are all the newbies. And thank you for introducing yourselves. All right, we are going to move on to some quick committee and roundtable updates before we get into our presentation today from Justin Freeman at Coffman Engineers. We'll just do a quick round robin here from what we're calling our committees. I'm wondering if there's any updates on Alaska-Iceland collaborations, and I'm just going to open this up to the floor here for any updates that might have developed there. And that's okay if we don't have any. Okay, we'll skip on to the next one, which is the roadmap, the Alaska State Roadmap, which is an effort that I've been facilitating. We finished our brainstorming sessions at the end of March. And concurrently with that, we've been having some breakout sessions with researchers, a couple of researchers at NREL, that would be Levi Kilcher and Masha Koleva, who have been on these calls, as well as Vince Neary from Sandia, working out some numbers for sort of baseline scenarios. So, you know, current energy use, current energy exports, just baselining numbers so we have good benchmarks. So that information is being pulled together. I don't have anything to share with you today. Last week was pretty all-consuming with Arctic Encounter, which I attended. So I'm hoping to dig into that this week and hope to provide updates in the coming week or two. So please stay posted on that front. The other area we've had discussions about are hydrogen fuel charging stations for the next Arctic Road Rally. Tim, I know you gave us an update last time. Are there any significant changes that looks like you're targeting something more in the 2024 timeframe for that? But wondering what else you might want to share with the group related to the road rally or hydrogen developments.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Tim Leach here, transportation lead for Launch Alaska. And the Arctic Road Rally, the big news is the event that we were planning this summer, we're actually going to be postponing because of a large disruption in the sponsorship for some of the EV charging. What that means for the hydrogen fuel cell charging stations is probably better alignment. As some of you from previous meetings heard, those companies that we have been talking with about those hydrogen fuel cell supported EV charging stations probably wouldn't be ready till 2024 anyway. So that's something that we'll be looking at for, potentially 2024, and that depends a little bit on availability of tech, especially for those who are new to this working group. If you have technology companies or providers who have EV charging, that's basically a fuel cell based EV charging station, certainly send them my way, or feel free to drop a name of a company into the chat and I'll grab that for follow-up later. Thank you.
Tim,
Thank you.
Can I chime in real quick? So there's two things. My company TechFlow we just got a sole source contract from the military to do all the EV infrastructure at every military base around the country. So from the EV charging standpoint, that's something that we are very well averse to, both working with government-owned vehicles and private-owned vehicles, and the ability to separate the two because of the military situation. So we can bring a lot of insight on that. The other thing is we are also working with GenCell, GenCell. Specifically, they have a hydrogen fuel cell, and more recently they teamed it with their what they call their EVOX solution, EVOX, and it is a hydrogen fuel cell, 372 kWh battery, and EV fast charger that they have in one Encompass unit that can also be tied to solar and grid, and has intelligence to be able to distinguish which generation source could power the batteries and then continue on to the vehicles. We are actually involved in a pilot with them in California, and I could also send a pilot over to Alaska as well. So if this is of interest, please let me know, and I'd be happy to go ahead and tell them we need to send one up to you guys and get that as part of, you know, the roadmap.
Perfect,
Wow.
AJ. I'd love to follow up on that that generous offer to make some connections here. And certainly there's been on our end some discussions that I've had with the U.S. Army's Ground Vehicle Systems Center, who
Yeah,
maybe
we were just on the phone with U.S. Army today to do every single Army station and the challenges that they're dealing with. They just got like $20 million a year per base and all this stuff. So we're deep into those. We actually did the entire energy infrastructure for Camp Pendleton. I mean, just all of the military bases. So, and then our background specifically on TechFlow is IT. So we actually have the sole source contract for all the cybersecurity for TSA, which is very important as we look towards deploying these infrastructure opportunities. The cybersecurity portion is absolutely critical.
Definitely. Thanks so much, AJ. I'll look forward to following up with you in the near future here.
Yeah, let's get a bunch of EVOX, I think that's what you call them.
Yep. Exactly
Fuel stations up here. I think that's a terrific idea. Let's put the road rally back on the calendar. Maybe not. So Tim, I'm understanding that the road rally is not happening in 2023 for reasons that are probably too complex to get into on this call. So that's too bad, but AJ sounds like a great person to follow up with. So have fun with those discussions, and I look forward to hearing what comes out of them, and you know, about how we're going to get EVOX stations all over Alaska. So, all right, terrific.
Sounds like we could at least start with the military bases, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But I heard him say he'd be happy to send a demo to Alaska. So we're gonna hold your feet to the fire on that one. All right, great. Well, that was a fun update. We also had a breakout group with regard to methanol engines in Alaska. JR, I know you've been working diligently on that with Craig and others. Are there any updates there, successes, wins that you can share with anyone, gripes, whatever?
Hey, not for lack of picking at it, but I'll look at Michael, because sometimes, actually quite frequently, he has more information than I do on this. Have you heard anything since we spoke last?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
No, not really. So I'm investigating a third-party fuel system that's they're developing a P2X e-fuel fuel system that could be installed on existing compression-ignited and spark-ignited engines, but they're still in the development phase. But I've been interacting with the factory trying to get more details as far as what we can do to provide a methanol or ammonia fueled solution to existing engines to at least get the ball rolling.
Well, and the exciting thing about that is that, yeah, if we can get the retrofit kits, then that kind of gets us around the import restrictions that EPA has on, you know, purpose-built methanol engines.
Right. So we'd be looking at an existing EPA certified engine, whether that be a gaseous fueled spark ignited unit or even a compression ignited diesel, and then installing this third-party fuel system. So we basically completely circumvent all the regulatory hurdles of getting a Euro emission engine imported into the US for operation.
And I guess just because we have a lot of new people on the call today, the 10-second, version is that methanol and ammonia are promising hydrogen carriers, and particularly for methanol, it burns in engines with technology that's readily available today, and it's mostly legal challenges that are preventing us from bringing these units in Alaska where we could start making, proving that we can have this cleaner alternative to hydrocarbons. So we've been trying to kind of figure out how to make that happen. So like on our end, we've been talking with some of the European manufacturers of the methanol engines we previously talked to. And I mean, everybody's still interested in it. We're just trying to figure out how to thread the EPA needle.
Great. Thank you, JR, and thank you, Mike. Really appreciate those updates. Folks can reach out individually to JR or Mike in the chat if you've got additional questions there, but that is a topic that we're tracking. This is a time when we open up, just a minute, Paul, I see your hand. When we open up the floor to additional sort of roundtable updates on hydrogen relevant topics before we have our presentation. So, announcements, wins, challenges, projects in progress, announcements for the good of the group, whatever folks are willing to share. So Paul, I see your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just had a question about methanol. And so are we looking at fuels that actually take carbon from the air and then release them like a net zero? Is that looked at as the same as green hydrogen that doesn't use any carbon? Is it considered the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about it for a long time, and we have a featured presentation to get to. So we can catch up later if you want the detailed answer. But the short answer is you just for ammonia as well as methanol. These are fuels that you can make in there's all the colors. So there's the gray methanol and the blue methanol and the green methanol, etc. So the ultimate holy grail, if you were to move to a methanol economy, would be that you would capture CO2 that would otherwise enter the atmosphere or is already in the atmosphere, and you would use that in order to make a liquid fuel, which could be burned easily in an engine, and you would mimic sort of the natural world that, carbon's emitted when the tree burns in this forest fire over here, but this tree over here, sucks it back up again, so everything's balanced. And just sort of, if we get better and better at carbon capture, it tends to favor methanol as a fuel, and if it turns out being too hard to do, it favors other things as fuels. And it's like, okay, well, it is something that even if we were to use gray methanol from natural gas, though, it cuts the carbon emissions compared to burning something that is made from oil, while also cleaning up a lot of other emissions. So even natural gas methanol is a step forward environmentally, but blue methanol or green methanol is obviously much better.
What they submitted to you for.
Okay. Hey, if you're not talking, please mute yourself.
I just wanted to, my own question was, does DOE look at them as the same? Because you can also, methyl cyclohexane or other thing you can use, but is introducing carbon into it, does DOE look at it the same? And I just want to say, for the project that I'm working on, it's a couple of them in the Aleutians that are geothermal, tidal, and wind, and we're working on with the University of Alberta on some special methods of like 3D seismic, except it's not seismic, it's actually using radiation that's naturally in our environment from the sun in order to predetermine the likelihood of geothermal fluid, so we can reduce some of the risk of the drilling programs, which are really expensive for developing geothermal. So that's the stage we are there. We know the energy is there, but we got to prove it up. And so we're trying to do as much research as we can on the front end to try to reduce the risk, which helps us the possibility of getting the funding for the drilling programs. Over.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that conversation and dialogue. Other roundtable updates on hydrogen projects or challenges or other relevant topics? Nothing? No other good news to share?
This is Nathan. I was just going to say there is So the IDO, Industrial Efficiency Decarbonization Office, I think it is, F year 23 multi-topic. So there's, like 8 different topics focused on hydrogen and hydrogen carrier type, anything from fundamental all the way to commercial scale projects. So there's really 2 topics that we at Mighty Pipeline are looking at, ammonia, combined heat and power systems, as well as really looking at ammonia as transportation through pipelines and processing at refineries for refinery decarbonization. So if anyone sort of has an interest in combined heat and power projects or industrial decarbonization with ammonia, happy to chat more there.
And I'm sorry, Nathan, were you referencing a funding opportunity at the very beginning there?
Yeah, that'd
Okay.
be so the concept paper is due April the 17th. So then you have so IDO.
IDO, I haven't heard that acronym before. I always hear it in the context of FOAs. Yeah, do you have a link to it or a number for identification so people can look it up?
Aaron, it's the new industrial, what is it, efficiency and decarbonization office, the FOA. I'll find the link to the FOA and put it in there.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to make sure we're providing good information to everyone on the call here so everyone can track and follow. And so Nathan, you said the 2 topic areas are combined heat and power, and what was the other one?
So
you guys are going after?
So really, what we're looking for at Mighty Pipeline is complete supply chain, using oil pipelines to move around hydrogen commodities. And so, really would be interested in sort of really proving out the supply chain and, really working towards actual projects. So if there's a, let's say, a peaker power plant that might need, fuel switching or anything like that, so we have fundamental things to work on, but any projects to sort of, because this is a 3-year sort of, funding call, we'd be happy to discuss those.
Okay, so you're actively looking for partners.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. All right. Other folks with roundtable updates.
Aaron, on the topic of funding there, Tim Leach again. Most likely, many of you have seen the charging and fueling infrastructure notice of funding opportunity that came out from the Federal Highways Administration there. I'll put a link just in the chat there. This is a 5-year program, so this is the first 2 years of funding that's made available with an application deadline for this first tranche the end of May, of this May. Perhaps if you don't have a project already scoped out, it might be a little tight to make that application deadline, but anticipating future funding years and those funding opportunities, if there is a need for fueling infrastructure, refueling for hydrogen, that is, this might be an application to keep an eye on in those future years. Obviously, I'll need to have another grant source, I think, for the actual machinery that will be using it for the fuel cell based or the hydrogen based vehicles.
Great, thank you. Other roundtable updates about hydrogen projects at any stage of development. Okay, well, if no one is going to speak up, we will jump right into our presentation. We're really fortunate to have with us today Justin Freeman from Coffman Engineers. And I see that he's got 2 of his colleagues on the call with him as well, Lee Bowling and Jason Moncrief. There may be others we have missed, no offense intended there. So Justin and team, welcome to the call, and the floor is yours to share your presentation and to get started.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And just confirm, I'm a Teams person now. For many years, I was on Zoom, but I've gotten so used to Teams, I'm a little rusty on my Zoom. So is everybody seeing my presentation okay?
No.
No. Okay. See? Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, it's always a little tricky to pick the right screen. There we go. It looks like it's starting up here. All right, we see it. You can go into presentation mode if you want. There you go. Perfect. Looks great. Yep.
All right. So folks that have not met me, my name is Justin Freeman. I work at Coffman Engineers. I'm our corporate vice president for carbon capture, utilization, storage, and hydrogen. So I volunteered to give you a little bit of insight in terms of what I've seen with some of the hydrogen hub development and some of the key things that make hydrogen hubs work, both in my time from my previous role in Chevron and then also in my current role as we've been working this over the last year. I'm sure everybody is looking forward to popping some champagne on April 7th and being done with the DOE submission for hydrogen hubs. I've got a lot of material I was going to cover and then try to leave a little bit of room for questions in the background. So I'll just go ahead and get started. So what I was looking to cover today is really to kind of define, at least in my mind, what makes up a hydrogen hub. Really talk about the viability, some of the use cases. I'm going to talk about generic examples because we're under pretty much NDA on all of our projects. And so I'm going to generically talk about what I see with use cases in terms of how those can be applicable to hydrogen. And then really how can you make those economics work? And then kind of tie it back in the end as to what that means for Alaska. So that's generally the topics. Let me know if you got any questions at the end. The one thing I always start with talking with people is hydrogen is not necessarily your first starting place to decarbonize the economy cost effectively. And if people are familiar with MAC curves, the way to read these graphics is, the carbon abatement is the width of the bar, and then kind of the below the line is economic, or at least there's a pathway to economics. And then above the line, that is a true cost to the business or society, depending on how you apply these curves. But there's a plethora of other opportunities, and we should be looking at those, whether that's electrification, natural solutions, energy storage, methane reduction, carbon offsets, as a holistic approach to decarbonization as sort of an energy transition toolkit. So, what is a hydrogen hub? The way that I kind of look at hydrogen hubs is they need to have that staying power after the government support's withdrawn, right? Can it be competitive in the marketplace without, the built-in tax credits, without the built-in grant money? And one of the things that I see is the key component of that is this anchor tenant. Do you have somebody that's going to be that offtake agreement to really kick this hub into gear? But there's a lot of shared infrastructure, so you need master planning, as much as you can to minimize the logistics. So can you do co-location of production? I think that's a unique feature of green hydrogen, where you have the water and you have the electricity, you have the ability to create your hydrogen. And so that mutual benefit in terms of the infrastructure, whether that's transportation infrastructure, pipeline infrastructure, there's lots of different end use cases. And the more that you can find those synergies across the infrastructure platform and the end uses, I see the benefits there to make the overall hub work from an economic standpoint. And I think key to any of these things is that community outreach. Where is hydrogen going to be used, whether that's a pipeline and how much hydrogen you're going to start to blend into that line. The public understanding of what we're doing and what we're planning as an industry, as a city planning, what does that mean for jobs? How is that going to change their everyday use? I think is extremely important so that you don't get cross-threaded later on in the development as you're trying to do the permitting. So that early community outreach, I think, is critical to hubs. And what I see across the value chain with the hubs is there's a lot of optionality. So, what I've highlighted kind of in dark is some of the things that we're directly involved with right now. But, I'm sort of agnostic in terms of what the technology is, as long as it's the right solution geographically for that area of the country. And that's going to be different. And that's what you're going to see in this next slide here is the way that the DOE hubs, at least with publicly available information, have approached this is very different depending on where in the country you are. But, some areas of the country are strong in wind resource, some areas are strong in solar, some have natural gas, some have geological storage. So we should really sort of not be trying to pick the technology winner, but really look at, again, what is that cheapest way to decarbonize the economy and shift us into a lower carbon future where we're using hydrogen across the right use cases So whether that's retail fueling, I'm going to talk about all these here. I think there are some that to me are a little bit more of a no-brainer, and I think that there's others that maybe hydrogen's not the right use case for. And one thing I won't really be, I think JR covers ammonia and methanol most of the time from these calls, so I'm gonna just go skip that today. But I think that obviously as an energy carrier with a hydrogen, that's important. So this is an interesting website. Everybody's trying to kind of keep track of the hydrogen hubs that they're aware of that are happening in the world and the United States today. I thought this was a good one, but what I thought was really interesting was kind of the color scheme there, where you see in the sort of the western part of the United States, the Pacific Northwest not really having that right geology for doing carbon capture, but they have lots of renewable energy. They've got a lot of hydro. So you're seeing that with both the Pacific Northwest and Obsidian, where they're doing renewable energy to make the hydrogen. You've got California that is very much pro green hydrogen, is very against oil and gas. So even though they have the right geology, they have the infrastructure to do blue hydrogen, there's not real strong policy support. Texas, I think you're going to see all shades of hydrogen colors there. There's going to be blue, there's going to be turquoise, there's going to be green. Texas is sort of agnostic as long as they are pro energy. And then it's clear in the kind of the North Dakotas, they've got awesome geology again. They've got a lot of the ethanol plants where you've got the existing sort of pipelines that are basically proposed to basically route that CO2 from the ethanol and ammonia plants to get that CO2 up into the Bakken area. So that's a natural fit where you're going to see likely kind of that blue hydrogen play. Same thing with the Appalachians over there. You've got the right geology to do large scale CCUS. So there's a natural fit for blue hydrogen. And then the other areas, are kind of that green hydrogen play. So I think it's kind of a good color illustration of the hydrogen color matching the strengths of the local geography. So, ultimately, everybody's probably seen this graphic a million times. But, what I kind of try to ask myself is, what is the incumbent technology or commodity? What are you really trying to displace, right? Is there a cheaper way to decarbonize that segment of the economy? And then ultimately, is the consumer going to choose it? Are they going to be comfortable with hydrogen in that use case? So whether that's in light duty transportation in their car or in their home heating, are they going to be comfortable with that hydrogen at the burner tip, at their water heater? Is that the right application? And then coming back to the most cost-effective regional method to make the hydrogen. So one thing I'm sure everybody on this call is aware of Scope 1, 2 emissions, that there's a lot of folks that aren't, honestly. So this is something that I thought was just useful. But what's really fascinating, I've seen this play out multiple times here in the last 3 or 4 months, where people are not caring about the carbon intensity of their hydrogen production. What they care about is the security of supply of the hydrogen. And what they're really doing is they're addressing their Scope 1 emissions, and they're moving those emissions to the person that is doing hydrogen. And I've seen this with steam methane reforming with zero carbon capture, and sort of digging just a little bit below that. It's just down to people's commitment to they're going to decarbonize their Scope 1. So they're looking to buy hydrogen, and they're shifting that to Scope 2. So the net effect from an economy standpoint, we haven't lowered the carbon emissions, but they've met their corporate goals of reducing their Scope 1 emissions. They do care about the carbon intensity tomorrow, but not today. The security of supply of hydrogen is more important than the carbon intensity. That will flip, but that's sometimes not the case today. Obviously, some companies care about both, right? The global hydrogen market right now is dominated by gray hydrogen. I think it's over 95% is coming from fossil fuels, and that is feeding into the ammonia, the methanol, and then basically the refinery market where they're using the hydrogen to crack long chain hydrocarbons to make them into more diesel, jet fuels. So these are the existing use cases. So they're a natural way to kind of look at a hydrogen hub is, can we displace maybe some of this market with new sources of hydrogen? But I think that the real prize is the growth in the hydrogen market. But this in itself is a huge market that a hydrogen hub can offer lower carbon intensity hydrogen and maybe have a competitive advantage if that's important to the consumer. So I was going to step through some of the use cases, and I just thought it was interesting, thinking about in the UK, they call it town gas, but a lot of towns used to be heated or used to use some variation of effectively hydrogen. But natural gas has been winning in this market for a long time. And I think you just basically boil it down to somebody's gas bill and economics. And if you tell them that your dollar per cubic foot of natural gas is going to go to $135 and it's $4 to $8 today, you're probably not going to have a lot of buy-in from the public, right? So if we can get down to that lower end of that production curve of the kind of DOE target there of $1, I'm not sure if you're making money at selling it for $1, but is there a realistic range where that can be a use case for the average consumer of natural gas, displacing that with hydrogen in the future? And I think that is a pure play. It's going to boil down to consumer acceptance from a safety standpoint and just pure play economics, right? Is it cost effective, or you significantly increasing somebody's home heating bill? And there's an element there of a blend to just to reduce the carbon intensity. So light duty transport, this is definitely an area of growth. I think folks, particularly in California, are feeling an obligation to offer the light duty transport. It's maybe not necessarily the business they want to be in. But there's a real issue with people getting these cards of having these hydrogen fueling cards and then not being able to supply or find supply of hydrogen for their Mirais or whatever car that is. And so that, there's websites dedicated to, is there hydrogen at the fueling stations, right? And so that's what the snippet there is in Los Angeles. And one of my colleagues in our San Diego office is right down the street from the one hydrogen fueling station in San Diego. And there's always a very long line of people waiting to see if they can fill up their car, right? So, that's a little bit of some growing pains and just a new growth market. But, this is the market that exists today, right? So you can sell into the retail market. But again, it's going to come down to that public acceptance. And I jokingly just said, who wants to sit on a pressure vessel? Because when I see this car cut away, that scares the hell out of me just as a mechanical engineer. But I think the average consumer would not realize that they're sitting in such proximity to high pressure hydrogen. But again, it comes down to the economics, right? You're talking about this is maybe $10 to $17 at California hydrogen stations, which is the equivalent of $5 to $8.50 per gallon for gasoline. Now, maybe in California, they're used to paying that type of price at the pump anyway, so maybe that's not a big hit for them, but that's a significant increase to the average consumer. So, buses, those are already a reality today. And I think this is just an illustration of a large growth sector. And one of those fits that I think, as you look at electrification, electric vehicles, light duty, I start thinking as you get into more of the bus and the heavier transit routes, I think that hydrogen is a little bit more of a better play economically. And one of the things on peaker or baseload power, it was interesting. I facilitated a conversation with the Obsidian Hub, and we brought in all the major sort of OEMs that were produced, turbines today, Caterpillar, we had Mitsubishi, and they all have plans to be able to go 100% hydrogen fuel in the future. That is part of their base plan. And I asked them, what was the biggest barrier to deployment of this as from a power standpoint? And their answer was very simple. It was cheap source of hydrogen. It is not a technology issue. And they have plans to address the NOx, so that's not an issue in their minds. And they have the ability to go to full 100% hydrogen. And some of these units, like the LM6000, you have the ability to go up to certain volumes. And then there's you could do modifications of the turbines to get higher, and but eventually full change out of turbines. But it's the barrier is the cheap hydrogen. And then what's interesting is I see this use case of peaker power plants as a niche where this seems to be a pathway from a hub standpoint to be a good use application is this peaker model. So as opposed to a simple cycle natural gas engine, you know, a hydrogen, whether you're doing a fuel cell or whether you're doing a turbine, that seems to be maybe a good application for hydrogen to fit into the power market. So maybe not as a base load power, but peaker seems to be a good application. So aviation obviously is a big focus area for Airbus. You know, these demonstrations are happening now. There's some other ones that have happened here in the United States, and Washington just recently had one. And I see, you know, that you've got this weight advantage with hydrogen, right? The amount of energy per pound or kilogram compared to, I don't have a kerosene on this, but you get the idea, right? Gasoline, diesel, on a pound per pound basis, it's got more energy, which is really important when you start talking about aviation. So, you know, I think the other thing that, you know, people think about is synthetic jet fuels, but those are extremely expensive, right? And so I think, to me, this is one of those areas that, going back to that anchor tenant, you look at airports, you look at military bases. What do those also have? Typically, they have ground support vehicles, they have buses, they have light rail, right? So you've got that anchor tenant, like an airport, that also has a lot of infrastructure. A lot of times airports are pretty crowded and might be hard to bring in the amount of electrification that might be needed for EV stations. And so you got maybe a really good synergy there of a transportation hub like an airport that offers, you know, a large volume like airlines of the future. And you can start with decarbonizing some of the smaller sectors, like the ground support vehicles, buses, and light rail. So this is just a little tongue in cheek, but I told my kids my goal is by the time I retire that some of the hydrogen from some of the projects that I work on is used to go into rocket fuel, right? So that's my professional goal is I'm going to fuel some rockets to maybe go to Mars. But this is already a place where hydrogen is winning in the marketplace, right? So I think it goes back to similar to what you see with the aviation. But, you know, ultimately it's going to come down to how do you make these economics work? So, you know, you can look at the hard numbers of cap and trade, the 45V tax credit, you know, green margin improvement. There is definitely a margin there where people are willing to pay that margin for hydrogen that is lower carbon intensity. And then there's just a societal pressure. You got that example where, you know, people are doing scope 1 and they're pushing that to scope 2. They're doing that because of the shareholder pressure, the pressure to demonstrate that you're getting to net zero. And ultimately, how do you get to the point where you have return on that capital, that investment, whether that's in that net present value, return on capital employed. And a big game changer, as everybody knows, is this 45V production tax credit. So you maximize that credit value by having the lowest carbon intensity being 0 to 0.45 as you decrease the credit value as you increase the kilograms of CO2. So this is just the billions of dollars that is going into in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and then the Inflation Reduction Act. So this is a lot of taxpayer dollars. We want to make sure this is going to the right applications, again, that has that staying power. We don't want to build these hubs that can't basically continue without that government support. And I think one of the things and one of the ways that you do that is, particularly in these hubs, is you have these repeatable designs at scale. So the way I think about this is, how do we have designs where we don't have engineering in the future, or that engineering is very minimal? We can drive out the project management. We have standardization. We have modularity. So that's kind of what you see there. And the bottom is like, this is a Nell product line where they have, basically module products across the value stream, the exception of the inverter there. That's an SMA product offering. But, you look at green hydrogen. That's actually a layout in Alaska over in the Point McKenzie, where you have a peak power rating of 65 megawatts of DC power on roughly about 100 acres, right? And so, one of the things is that that's the peak power. So you can't necessarily pair that with 65 megawatts of electrolyzers because you're going to have a lot of underutilization of that asset, right? So that's part of the crux with I see with renewables a lot is, how do you get that right infrastructure pairing to drive up the utilization to the highest amount? Wind and solar combination, or some type of, combination of different power sources, or battery storage, in order to basically kind of take away some of that peaky thing that happens with the solar and the wind. But ultimately, you're trying to get the repeatability. You're trying to get the projects and designs that scale in order to, drive down that unit cost of hydrogen. That's a big thing. We got to get the unit cost of hydrogen lower. I honestly don't think $1 a kilogram is probably achievable, but aspirational goals. So this is just kind of a visualization of what we were just looking at there, where we got the repeatability of sort of a production schematic of how to use renewables with green hydrogen electrolyzers, kind of looking through that value chain then. But you could replicate this for also blue hydrogen or other sort of production methods. It's that repeatability that's really important. And we've done some analysis. This is my disclaimer down there. This is not for financial decision making, but just illustratively showing how the government cost share and also the 45B tax credit can really move the economics. So in the above example, you don't have any government support. So you've got basically a period where you're not even getting to the point where you break over up until 2040, right? A lot of folks that are bringing capital, they want to see payback periods in the 2 to 5 range, right? They don't want to see a payback period that's a decade or more. And so when you bring in the cost share, you're decreasing obviously the amount of capital that somebody has to bring to make that project work. And then you're also accelerating that breakover point. And then the same thing with the 45B tax credit is you're impacting that developer's cash flow at the most important time from an economic standpoint, which is early in the project life, right? You're getting that benefit when the time value of money is most important to that developer, which is early in the project life cycle. And the one thing to think about this is now we have that base infrastructure, right? Now we have the infrastructure that is there. And so, in 20 years where I make money, it isn't $8 a kilogram or $17 a kilogram anymore. You can make a very nice return at $3 to $4, maybe even $2 a kilogram. So my view is that this is a once in a generation play to help establish the new infrastructure that's going to be there for the next 50 to 75 years, because it's taken us 100 years to build the current infrastructure that we have today. And that will lower the price points in the decades to come. So this is just a sensitivity analysis that basically kind of shows what really matters. And those big bars at the very top is hydrogen price and then hydrogen price escalation. And I've actually done a deflationary on the low end on that one. And that is why what I see is that one comment from a friend of mine, he said, if I have an offtake agreement, which is basically volume and price, I have certainty of my capital costs, right? That uncertainty range around my cost. I just have a good cost estimate for my project. I have unlimited access to money. That is where the market is right now. If you have a production offtake agreement and you have good certainty as to what your capital cost can be, there's unlimited capital money right now. So what does this mean to Alaska? So there's a huge opportunity. 65% of our electricity generation is petroleum based. Obviously, we have a large hydroelectric that supplies a good portion of the electricity in the state. But you've got 60% of it is hydrocarbon based. So there's maybe an opportunity there. But the other thing to think about is, we're an energy exporter today, right? And we should be an energy export in the future. But more and more countries, or the West Coast, I mean, you saw that they want the energy and not the CO2 emissions, right? If you think about CO2 as a pollutant, they want the energy, they don't want the pollution. So right now, Alaska exports roughly, let's just call it 70 million metric tons of CO2 per annum via oil exports. So we're thinking about, new energy exports. We need to be thinking about, how can we keep, the pollutant here in Alaska, and how do we export the energy? We have so much energy in the state. The other thing is we got to decarbonize our own grid. So, there's a lot of things that are going to basically shift to electrification. I don't think that all of this thermal energy can shift to our current grid, because, we have to decarbonize the existing grid. And then this is going to be new electrification. So I see a role in the state across all these spectrums here where hydrogen can play a role in that. And Alaska is just blessed. I mean, Alaska has all four of these. We've got saline aquifers, we've got, opportunity for EOR, depleted oil and gas fields. We have the opportunity to do what Iceland's doing with mineralization and accelerated pace with salt. So every single opportunity that is there from a geological sequestration to enable blue hydrogen is here in the state of Alaska. And then, we've got a large abundance of solar energy. If you kind of compare that to Germany, and what we did was sort of an analysis of one of the sites where we're doing this in California. It's not as good of a resource compared to California, but it's still a valid resource where it's going to be seasonal. So again, whether you can make those economics work seasonal, but we've got the solar resource, we've got an enormous offshore wind resource. This is an NREL, and so we've got the energy here. We just have this huge opportunity to export that energy, and I think that that's going to be some variation of hydrogen production. So Alaska's got all of the above. We've got EOR, biomass. We could do negative carbon intensity hydrogen with our biomass production. Geological storage, fossil fuel resources. We've got the right type of skill force in the state. We've got anchor tenants. We've got, the international airport here, in addition to the military bases. So they were just talking about the military and the EV fueling. So I think that there's this great opportunity here in the state. I think we can learn from other hubs as those start to move forward, and we're right on the doorstep of this export market to the Asia Pacific. So, and that's all I have, Aaron. I tried to go through that in a timely way that we could reserve some time for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Justin. That was a whirlwind, but a great survey of information. And I'm wondering if you would be able to share your slides. Maybe if you're willing to do that, maybe you could send those to Patty and she could distribute them later, or whatever version you're willing to share. So thank you for that. I have a question to kick things off. In your last couple slides there, you said Alaska's got all the elements. What do you think it will take, or what would it take to establish a hub here? Obviously, there's been some attempts over the last year or two, or more. What are the missing pieces? What's our biggest hurdle?
Yeah, I think that anchor tenant that's local is really would be a critical component to get it started. Because I think that if the more that you can keep your production and your use case together, it just greatly simplifies the cost and the complexities of trying to get the hub started. And so, I think to me that's one of the key things is where's that anchor tenant, whether it's one of the military bases, the airport. We don't have necessarily the big industrial base that some of the other cities would have, like example, if you have a refinery, right, that's got gray hydrogen today, that could be displaced by green hydrogen tomorrow. And you've got that customer. So I think to me that anchor tenant and finding that with the lens towards, that expansion, I think is a big component to me.
And it sounds like you feel strongly that anchor tenant has to be local.
It doesn't have to be. it's just an easier way to start. That just the complexities of trying to ship hydrogen and methanol and ammonia. You have to get to a lot of times a pretty big scale to make that work, right? So it's not to say that you couldn't start that way. You're jumping into pretty large scale quite quickly.
Okay, and then one more question. For a local anchor tenant, what scale of demand do you think is necessary to kickstart this? And I realize that's a pretty pointed question, but do you have any sense of numbers?
Well, so we've been trying to kind of, it kind of depends on whether you're doing blue or green. When you're doing the green hydrogen, you're really trying to kind of match your renewable resource with what you have available, and then that kind of determines your whether it's alkaline or PEM, kind of what your megawatt of your electrolyzer is. And one of the crux there is, if you're doing a green hydrogen development, your utilization of the asset, it is going to be quite low if you just match like your solar and your electrolyzer, because it's dark, it peaks, especially in Alaska where you got the seasonality. And so trying to kind of just find that right balance of capital to then sort of influence your utilization is a kind of a tricky balancing act. For the blue hydrogen or even turquoise, I'm actually a really big fan of this chemical looping technology from Babcock to Wilcox that I just had a conversation with them a couple weeks ago about. I think that then you start to look at, okay, what's your geological storage capability? And so your injection well, I don't think it's necessarily going to be a limiting factor, but you do have to then sort of do that assessment of the subsurface as to what is the geological storage potential. And then that starts to dictate sort of your size of your asset that you can build out from that's going to have CO2 emissions associated with it, because that will then maybe determine your useful life of your subsurface asset.
Okay. Thank you, Justin. Other questions? Please raise your hand or jump in.
I have a question, Justin. And so, you talked about you might be able to make money around $2 to $4 a kilogram for hydrogen. But what is your assumption there for the cost of electricity? It seems like that's the most basic driver there, in terms of cents per kilowatt hour. Is it 3 cents, 5 cents? What's kind of the range of electrical production? Because that's where we'll be starting with some of these projects.
Yeah, and to clarify, that $2 to $4 is almost in like a point forward economic view, right? So once you have all your infrastructure some costs, and that kind of point forward economic, I think you could, with just your basic running OpEx, you can maybe make money at that $2 to $4 sort of range. But the electricity cost, at least what we're seeing down in California, you're kind of the range of 4 to 7 cents, where you're able to get a solar developer. They're quite prevalent down there, right? Where you get the access to the acreage, you hire somebody to build out your solar field, and or maybe you do a power purchase agreement. What I was testing on the bookend there, the economic tornado, I think I was using maybe 14 cents. So I think the range I had there in the tornado was 3 cents, 7 cents, and then 15 cents.
Okay, and just one more question. You said you are working with some other clients. Do any of those would they stop you from working with somebody else, or can your firm work with anybody?
Yeah, no, we work with lots of people. We can work with anybody.
Okay, thank you. I might be contacting you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Paul. More questions for Justin?
Hey, Justin, I had a question. So when you were talking about the anchor tenant and the importance of it being nearby to the point of production. It seemed like you had kind of given that quite a lot of thought. I mean, and I just wanted to dive down maybe into how you see it working, because it seems like there's a certain tension where if you have this, green power source or something, and it's close to the point that needs energy, you start losing the justification of making hydrogen at all. You just wire the power over. So it seems like there's, specific cases or a certain amount of distance where a hydrogen pipeline starts making more sense than a wire. And I just thought maybe if you could unpack that a little bit, it would be interesting.
Yeah, no, you're right, JR. A lot of times, if you're going to, have an electron, right? Is there a use for that electron at the cost point that you can make money? Why not just sell the electron into the grid, right? And I think that electrification is definitely a component of, the first use case for a lot of that. I guess part of my maybe bias from my career is I've been part of giga projects that, were supposed to cost $20 billion, was supposed to basically be done in 10 years. Turned into $40 billion projects or more that are still going on. And I've also then had the experience of smaller repeatable projects to achieve scale. And so, like I say, I have this inherent belief that if you can start with something with a lens towards repeatability and a lens towards achieving scale, that allows for moving quickly, building quickly, limiting your capital exposure, but you're doing it with a lens to achieve scale. And so that tends to be a smaller volume or market play, where then you can afford to be more local in your use case and not have either the ship infrastructure or the pipeline infrastructure, all the associated permitting. And so you kind of learn by doing with a lens towards achieving scale eventually, but you get this feedback loop where you're like, okay, we now know how to do the construction. We now know how to do the procurement and the sourcing and the inventory. We know how to do the operations, and you're de-risking the project because you're doing this stage development.
But what's your hydrogen customer, your ideal hydrogen customer? Do you think what's that optimal opportunity where you're saying, no, we're not just going to sell you power. You're obviously going to benefit from hydrogen, but you're not so far away that it's going to become hard for us, but that local small scale project to provide it.
Well, I think where you can vary kind of the offtake and the uses, right? There's companies that, they're doing small things, right? They're doing the forklifts, they're doing emergency backup power, they're addressing their scope 1 emissions, right? And so if you can find those companies, and they might not be making those decisions on a financial basis, but if they looked at the alternatives to basically do all those same things, they might, go the route of diesel, right? But they're consciously making a decision where they're choosing a higher cost option, and that kind of gives you your initial market. And then, do you have, optionality to basically be a peaker from a power plant standpoint? And so you're sort of growing your customer base with diversity of uses, while you're also kind of having a lens towards, where's the market going to mature to the point where it's going to start to scale up. And there is this kind of chicken and egg thing going on right now, right? Where you've got a lot of basically people rushing in, particularly in the lower 48, rushing into the hydrogen production market because of the $3 per kilogram tax credit without really an understanding of a firm use case on the customer side. So it's kind of a funny market right now. I'm not sure if I fully answered your question there.
Justin, Bill
Okay.
Levy here. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Bill.
Justin, 2 questions, please. What's the future for energy at Fort Wainwright? And secondly, is Coffman tracking the progress in deep hot dry rock geothermal, which when and if we can bore deep enough, cheap enough to profitably access it, then obsoletes many other forms of variable energy resources, because it's base load and energy storage is free. You leave the heat in the ground until you need it, and it's ubiquitous. So it erases any geographic advantages that we might imagine for Alaska Energy. Is Coffman tracking that? Thank you.
So on the Wainwright, I mean, I don't know if I can speak to the future of the Wainwright base, but I think that, you know, the bases and the military, you know, they are aggressively trying to decarbonize. So I think that, you know, working with partners like the military and the city and the utilities, to kind of come up with the game plan as to, you know, how to start small and then scale and see where there's synergies of use cases across those is a good starting place. But I don't think I could probably speak to exactly what Wainwright's choosing there, but, and I don't know if I fully understand the geothermal question. I mean, we do have folks in our company that are trying to kind of keep up with what's going on with geothermal, but that's definitely not my area of focus.
I'm talking about deep, hot, dry rock geothermal, not hydrogeothermal. So there's no prospecting risk because we're in the basement now, and the basement is ubiquitous. We're 6 to 10 kilometers deep, going after 250 to 350 C and 250 or 300 C by the time we get it to the surface. So we can use it for ORC generation with electricity left over to make hydrogen. That's the hydrogen connection.
Gotcha.
So that was my question, but I understand if that's not your expertise. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Bill. More questions for Justin?
Aaron, Tim here with kind of a follow-up on the conversation from JR there and Justin on those use cases that I think JR was kind of poking out a bit. And Justin, you touched on this, I think, briefly when starting there with light duty ground vehicles and saying there's probably not a great use case, you know, maybe even just on economics there, where battery electric vehicles are going to probably be more cost effective. And I think that's in particularly or pointing towards medium and heavy duty as potentially a better application. So I think, and this is JR in your line of questioning, I think up here in Alaska, you know, what we're starting to see off of the medium and heavy duty pilots for battery electric vehicles is their performance isn't as good as we were hoping because of the cold climate challenge. So I think that's where, you know, kind of initial piloting for use cases in that medium and heavy duty space could be effective. We could find out if, you know, a fuel cell is going to be better. There are probably going to be some cold challenges there to figure out, you know, what do you do with the wastewater when you're purging it? What kind of, you know, heat tape you need to put on the back end on the exhaust or whatever, right? But those types of applications could be, I think, really useful just to demonstrate up here. And that could blend in, I think, with some of the conversation, both in the chat and over the air here around, you know, whether that's at the port or the airports, and then also with the air bases.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, one way I like to look at it is kind of looking at those almost like a system design, right? Because in an individual use case on the light duty, you might say like, well, you know, battery is the right choice, right? But then if you start to look at the distribution infrastructure, you start to look at like all the other things that have to be invested in. Well, maybe there's, you know, a mixture where, you know, even in light duty, hydrogen vehicles play a role because you don't get to this tipping point where you have to make this major investment in the grid. And if you do a mixture, then maybe you don't have to do that, right? There was I was listening to a conversation with the ERCOT folks in Texas, and they were just talking about that end of line transmission. And, you know, one of the, you know, CEOs of one of the power companies, he's like, you know, I bought a Tesla and I go to plug in my Tesla and there's a low voltage and it won't charge my Tesla because I'm at the end of the line, right? And so as you think about like the system design, you know, I think that there's a role for, you know, fuel cell vehicles in addition, and I definitely think there's a role for battery vehicles as well. It's just, you know, what is the right application, and that system, that might be a different answer depending geographically or what part of the country you're in. I think AJ maybe had his hand up.
Yep, go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, Justin, I was wondering, are you guys actively involved with the Arches group out of California that's, you know, working towards the DOE hydrogen hub monies?
So there's a lot of companies that signed a memorandum of commitment with Arches. We did not, but
yeah, that's
Okay.
maybe,
No, I just
maybe
wanted,
all I can say there.
yeah, I've been working with them as well as Voice, so I just wanted to understand where you guys fit in with what they're doing as well. Thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions for Justin?
I have a question for Justin. Justin, what are your goals for this year and the next year?
Well, what are my goals?
Yes,
That's world domination.
go ahead.
I'll vote for you as supreme dictator, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, our goal as a company is, we're really trying to establish strategic partnerships across these different sectors. The way I like to phrase it is, I'm trying to create partnerships that span decades, not projects. So we're trying to look for those opportunities where, we can develop that type of relationship, because I believe that these are projects where, companies need to learn how to together and then apply those learnings in, the project 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And so, you do that through not contractual relationships, but more strategic relationships. So that is my goal.
Along with taking a ride on a rocket, right? Okay. Brian, I see you've got a hand up.
I was curious if he could repeat what city he's located in and if he takes in-person visits.
So I'm located in Anchorage, Alaska. And if you're in Anchorage, happy to get together and talk shop. I do travel quite a lot. We have, I think we're up to 21 offices now. And so I've only been to 10 of them. So I'm trying to get to the rest of the 10 this year. So if anybody's going to be at the World Hydrogen Conference in Houston, we're hosting a booth there, and I'll be a speaker talking about hydrogen hubs there as well in May.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe one last question for Justin, if someone's got one.
I guess if nobody else says it, I sort of an idea, I guess, question / comment. Just getting back to the use cases, and I know you were saying that the best case for hydrogen is really to use hydrogen where hydrogen is needed currently and sort of build from there. And I mean, you may be more aware of this and able to provide some color than I am, but I believe the Kenai refinery had expressed sort of publicly that they were having, due to ongoing natural decline of natural gas resource in South Central, that, their ability to get hydrogen from natural gas in order to run hydrodesulfurization on the diesel might be limited. Does that seem to you like maybe if there is low-hanging fruit for hydrogen use out there, and do you know if anybody's thinking or talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, with the natural gas, and I mean, I haven't heard anything, JR, of the refinery trying to find alternative, renewable sources of hydrogen, but that could be, underway. But I think that there's something there. I think the one thing with any of these green hydrogen, for instance, right, that there is a land impact, right? Like there is an impact, just like fossil fuel development. So if you're doing solar, if you're doing wind, these all have impact, right? And so I think that as I think about the Kenai Peninsula, right, like do you want to fill a lot of that area in with solar? Do you want to put wind? Whether it's a good wind resource or not. But I do think that the Kenai refinery, from a hydrogen standpoint, that could be a good anchor tenant. If you're able to find that is an alternative source other than natural gas.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, maybe that's something, if, I don't know if anybody on this working group has contacts over at Marathon. My impression was that they were just sort of worried about where they were going to get hydrogen. I don't think that they had like a plan for some alternative generation, but it seemed like perhaps they'd be approachable if somebody had a good idea and they can provide it to them at a competitive price.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I would love to see is, the governor talks about all the high energy prices to the villages, right? If we could come to, that smaller scale, standard, repeatable sort of design where you kind of get that self-sufficiency in energy production, to me, that'd be awesome, right? From Alaska standpoint, we have all these microgrids, here's a way that we can, do energy storage where maybe you overbuild in certain areas of the summer. You do long duration energy storage with metal hydrates, and you're providing that energy and that hydrogen on more of a yearly basis. So to me, it's a smaller use case, but that could be a use case that could scale across the state, which would be, have just an enormous benefit to the community and to their energy prices if we could get that right. Question, Justin, you just mentioned kind of the longer term energy storage, and this might be a conversation for a longer presentation, but in terms of that concern on kind of fugitive or standby losses, I guess would be the way to say it, and boil off and things like that. Is there an easy engineering fix? Maybe that's the easy question right now to that, that's also cost effective, or is that a complex problem that we're still working to solve? Yeah, there's commercialized products. There's a company called GKN Hydrogen, and they do that metal hydrate storage. And I was literally just talking about the cost of that this morning. It was less than $300,000 for 25 kilograms of hydrogen storage. Okay. So I mean, without being an engineer or having that much depth on the reading there, are metal hydrates the way to prevent that boil off issue and fugitive emissions? Okay, thanks for the very short Cliff Note version of it. Yeah, it's not cryogenic, right? It's basically it's bonded to the surface of the metal, and it's actually designed to be put on the output of an electrolyzer. So an output of an electrolyzer is typically around 40 bar. And so it basically takes the output of that and it stores it. I'm not going to try to pretend like I understand the complexities of how it does that and everything else, but it's a pretty cool product. They're actually out there right here. Got it. And so it sounds like it's not liquefied, like you said, it's not cryogenic, so you're gonna need more space for the storage. So this would be kind of a ground application with spaces and options wherever you're storing it. I mean, the 25 kilogram storage it's not huge. It's in this little containerized package. So I think it could be like a good application for the village scenario that we're talking about. Thanks.
Okay, I think we want to wrap it up here, and we have just a few more things to discuss before we close. Thank you again, Justin, for the great presentation, and thank you all for the good conversation and dialogue afterwards. We will be posting a recording, and hopefully we can get a copy of a shareable version of the slides from you as well, Justin. So thanks again. Before we wrap up, I want to bring folks' attention to our next Hydrogen Working Group meeting, which is scheduled for May 2nd, same time, 11:30 to 1. And our speaker at the next meeting will be Todd Solomon from Zero Avia, which is the hydrogen electric propelled airplanes. So a really exciting development there, and coming to fruition, I believe even in Alaska. So interesting stuff there. And I'm really excited to sort of see the numbers and the economics about it as well. So I hope you'll all join us there. Patty Egan will be on top of it in terms of sending out invites and save the dates and making sure that you all get notices about that. And then finally, we've talked for some time about having an in-person gathering. And I would like to propose that we use the upcoming Alaska Sustainable Energy Conference at the end of May as an impetus for that, since I'm hoping that many of you may be participating in that or coming up for it. So it may be a way to get us all in one place. And in looking at the agenda for that conference, and if folks don't have that readily available, there it is in the chat. It runs from May, it starts with a reception in the evening of Monday, May 22nd, and then it wraps up sort of mid-afternoon on Thursday, May 25th. And I think there's two options for getting together, and I wanted to poll the group informally so that we can start to think about setting something up. One option might be early or sort of late afternoon on Monday, May 22nd, maybe before and running a little bit into the opening reception for the Sustainable Energy Conference, which starts at 5 p.m. I think it's 5 to 9 if you look at that welcome reception. So maybe we could do something 4-ish or something like that on Monday if folks will be in town. The other option might be Thursday afternoon after everything's all over. My only hesitation there is that I don't know about you all, but I'm pretty wiped out at the end of a conference, and I might not be good for much discussion or conversation at that point. So just want to put that out there.
You might be ready for a beer, though. You know.
Oh, yes, definitely ready for a beer. But again, that might not make me a very good conversationalist, depending on how many beers I'm ready for. So let me put that out there. Would folks be interested in doing a special in-person get-together at the Sustainable Energy Conference? And we can do this separate from the conference, so you don't have to, be necessarily a part of the conference, although it sounds like, that's also a great pairing. And John Espandola, I see you have your hand up. So do you have something to add to this conversation regarding a get-together?
Yeah, I do, Aaron. Thank you for offering that up as an opportunity to get together in person. What I wanted to mention to all the attendees on this call is I can help work on some space, either at the Denina, potentially here in the Atwood, to convene this group. Of course, that's variable on the amount of attendees, but basically Monday afternoon through Thursday afternoon, we have the entire Denina to ourselves, and we've incorporated private rooms specifically for this. And so depending on what your attendee count looks like, Aaron, I'm happy to work with you on a space that's close proximity so that we can convene either prior to the conference kickoff on Monday or at the end of the day on Thursday.
Okay, that's great. Or maybe both. Thank you, John. That's wonderfully generous of you. And I think we'll be following up with you. We will follow up with folks about doing something, either Monday or Thursday, but I think that's what we're thinking. Patty, do you have anything to add to that in the way I'm framing it for the group?
No, I think that works. Do you want us to just send out kind of when things get finalized, send it out to the larger group still? We know most people are in Anchorage, so I think that'll work.
Okay. I'd love to just see, I think it'd be great to meet sort of before the conference, because that'll seed a lot of discussions that could happen during the conference. So maybe, that Monday afternoon, 4 o'clock or something like that, and then people can go right into the reception after that for the conference. Would there be any major objections to doing something like that? Or are there strong preferences for doing something Thursday after things wrap up?
I'll be at either. Just tell me when.
Okay. Yeah, the conference itself looks pretty packed, as do the evenings. So I didn't want to put anything on Tuesday or Wednesday evenings. Okay, we will do our best to schedule something and let you all know when we end up scheduling it. And until then, thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at our next working group meeting on May 2nd, and that will be virtual. And again, we'll have Todd Solomon from Zero Avia. Really excited about that presentation. Are there any other announcements for the good of the group before we sign off here? All right, well, thank you. Have a great rest of the week. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Aaron.